My father only ever ran from the truth. Disclaimer. Viewer discretion advised. This piece is based on traumatic life events and may be triggering for sensitive viewers. Subjects may include domestic abuse, substance abuse, and more. Please make sure you feel able to handle these themes before continuing. Hi. To speak these words is to walk through a gate of fear. It feels like stepping out into the open with nothing to hide behind, naked, vulnerable, uncertain. For a long time I carried shame that wasn't mine, secrets that didn't belong to me but weighed me down as if they did. This story isn't about exposing someone else. It's about refusing to carry what was never mine to begin with. By walking through this gate, I'm not revisiting the shadows, I'm transforming them. And maybe, in doing so, I can remind myself and anyone listening that the only way to survive your shadow is to face it. Because if you don't, one day you'll be at its mercy. This story should begin where it all began, but that's not possible. My father was already an alcoholic before I was born. It's hard life when someone else's alcoholism is the engine of your existence, when you have no say in it, no power to save yourself from its damage. For a child to be raised in such conditions, I believe, is kind of hell. The caregiver is not the parent, but the child themselves. It took many years of therapy for me to accept that when someone jumps off a bridge, you must ask if helping them means being forced to go down too. My father never wanted what most would call help. He wanted the bottle, and people nearby to clean up the wreckage. That was my mother's full-time job, or perhaps her mission in life. First her father's drinking, then her husband's. As a devout Catholic, she believed she had no escape. Family pressure kept her trapped, reminded of her place, urged to minimize my father's damage. I never felt supported by them. It always felt like I was being asked to join a twisted dance, while my father drowned in the bottle, so I stayed away. Sometimes at a distance greater than I'd keep from a stranger. I could never trust adults. From early childhood, they endangered me again and again. I was a rat caught in the gears of a much bigger machine. The only way to survive was to keep distance, stay in the shadows, freezing emotions inside, stacking one trauma on top of another, with the faint hope that someday, when safe, I could thaw them out and heal. It took many failed therapy attempts to reach that stage. I'd adapted too well to my hostile environment, too intellectual, too frozen. Even the smallest emotions overwhelmed me. But eventually, the ice began to crack. When your childhood home is filled with violence, when your parents' battles use you as a shield, trust doesn't exist. Isn't trust believing someone won't hurt you? All I knew was pain. My father was rarely physically abusive with me. His weapon was emotional abuse. Sober, he was timid, almost pleasant, but drunk, he became a monster. The closest I've ever seen to the real thing. He delighted in provocation, using details gathered while sober to break people when drunk. He pushed until they shattered. It was mental warfare, or perhaps more accurately said, torture. I saw it almost daily. My mother would yell for hours at night, her pain spilling out in profanity. That alone was torture enough, but it was only the first level of hell. The more alcohol was involved, the deeper the demon took us. The second came when words broke into violence. My mother, driven past the edge, grabbed kitchen appliances as weapons. I hid, pretending I didn't exist, praying it would end. And then, the frying pan, the clumsy drunken strikes, her running into my room shouting for help. Next, we held the door. We held the door like it was a foreign invader trying to tear us apart. We held the door while the noise on the other side roared like a demon. I held the door because that was all I could do. We held the door until the threat passed, and then we slept until the next day began. So often my mother would wake everyone up by shouting her complaints at my father, still half unconscious from the night before, shouting to release her emotions, her pain, her hurt. Pain was thrown from one adult to another, never mind me, just trying to not exist in the midst of all this. I became an emotional freezer, never releasing the pain, never letting it spill onto others by accident. I understood early that the cycle of violence spins only if an outside force keeps it turning. I swore not to be that force. So I froze it all, sending it into the cold depths of space, waiting until maybe someday I'd have the strength to deal with it. Therapy, time, and grit slowly gave me that chance. There were more levels of hell I endured, but some stories still burn too hard to tell. And perhaps it's no longer necessary for me to dwell. I call these levels of hell because that's how they felt to me. And to this day, I can feel its heat. That was my hell. I've never in my life come any closer to anything that could even light a candle to this all-consuming flame of hatred. If someone wanted to put me in hell, all they would need to do is to turn back time and have me relive my childhood. No need to be creative. It has all already happened. I've been there. My father eventually lived alone as a widower for several years after my mom passed away from cancer. Visiting him was like revisiting hell. I asked to only see him sober, but he rarely listened. You can't reason with a devil who enjoys the flames. To his family, me and my mother were rags to clean up his mess. We were the sacrificial lambs, never respected, never counted. The cruelest trap was enabling. The only help he accepted was whatever allowed him to keep drinking. He refused doctors, hospital, any real care. As a child, I had no choice but to be codependent, but I refused to be an enabler. So much of my life was about choosing the least bad option, always at my expense. What still pains me most, no one helped me as a child. Adults saw, they knew, and did nothing. Before my father's death, I cared for him as much as I could. I'm not sure if it was because of the pressure from his family or the way I was raised to forever do the right thing, or a combination of factors. To me, it was sort of like taking care of a prisoner on death row. He was already trapped and incapable of more harm, really. So I felt like I can at least work through my issues this way and resolve them before it's too late. It wasn't fair, but child abuse victims rarely experience fair. And I realized something. My father's greatest downfall was never facing the truth, maybe because of his own pain. But I learned the opposite. To always face the truth, even when it burns me. Facing the shadows, the demons, the fear. That's how you evolve. How else are you going to learn and improve anything if you can't even face it? Facing fear, discomfort, shadow, and standing there with it, looking it straight in the eye is often enough to overcome yourself. It wasn't easy. Months of hard work, therapy, and draining visits. But somehow I marched forward. There came a day when from early morning I felt something different. Like angels whispering to me that today is the day. I was ready to move beyond my past self into something new. When I arrived at my father's place, I cleaned up and prepared food as usual. And there was a moment I felt I'm ready to offer forgiveness. I don't know why or how. I never expected that would be possible. It never felt like he deserved it, and that has not changed. But I understood at that point that it was never about him. I got myself together and told him I forgive him. But he rejected it. As usual, there was a complete denial from his side. He could not accept it, as it would mean admitting fault. And that was something he has never done. It was frustrating, but after a few moments I attempted again. He reacted similarly, with denial, asking what is there to forgive? At that point, I felt like I'm trying to achieve the impossible. I went to the kitchen to make him a cup of coffee, and I almost gave up, yet I felt like I'm not quite finished. Maybe third time's the charm? I thought to myself, I've already come this far, might as well try and bring it to the end. I knew that I had to open myself up and be completely present. This was never about words, but energy. And somehow, by a miracle, I got there. I have managed to offer forgiveness he could not reject, because it flew energetically, like a wave that could not be stopped. The third time was the charm because it was not words, it was real energy. Wave function flowing through matter. My father cried as I said, I forgive you everything, because he could probably never forgive himself. And that forgiveness was not offered because he deserved it, because he could never. It was because it was mercy. And in that moment, I have managed to surpass myself. I would have never guessed this possible if you'd asked me even now. Because letting go of justice, fairness, and accountability feels like death. because it's the death of self, death of the ego. And yet, when you can do it, a door opens, door to your higher self. I've been walking the path that door has led me to ever since, not because there's anything to gain from it, but because there's everything to lose. And once you do, you become everything. This was, I believe, the most difficult lesson of my life, but perhaps most important. A week after that event, my father passed away. It was as if the act of forgiveness released the pressure pent up inside of him. During that final week in between, my father's family came to see him as if everyone somehow knew unconsciously that it's that time, the last pilgrimage. Truth might not make you happy, but it will set you free. It will burn you along the way, but those are the flames of purification. I call that day my grand paradox, because I made a miracle happen. I forgave what I thought unforgivable, and it was because in part I followed the way in my heart. I served the one I hated. I put aside my ego and lived as closely as I could in service to something greater than I. That something greater was love, mercy, and forgiveness. And as hard as it was, as much as it felt like more than I can give, somehow I managed it, and it has transformed me. To sum it up, sometimes those meant to protect you will be the ones who destroy you. But you can be your own angel. Even if no one saves you, you can save yourself, love yourself, forgive yourself. It's your story. It's always been about you. And the lesson here is simple yet universal. If you never face your shadow, one day you'll be at its mercy. But when you turn to meet it, the weight it carries no longer chains you, it becomes fuel for transformation and even forgiveness. Thank you so much for watching.